Righty, so the All Blacks team has been named for the first test against the Springboks, and it's slightly underwhelming, isn't it? It's a tough one to swallow really because it's like an underwhelming team, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily angry with any of the selections. I think there are probably players that I would prefer to see in there, but I don't hate it, And I think you just got to look at it and say, well, Rennie, we trust what Rennie's doing. No reason to not trust what he's doing. So let's see what happens on Saturday. But let's have a quick look at it and see, yeah, what sort of positions I thought would have gone a different way. Guys, before I get into everything, if you do like the content that I'm putting out, can you please just think about subscribing? It really does help me and it helps the channel grow. I really want to create a space like New Zealand rugby or all things rugby, really, and a bit of other, sport mixed in there. And yeah, having you guys subscribe and like my content, it really, really helps. So thank you and enjoy the vid. Alrighty, so let's have a look. So, I mean, the front row was standard, right? We all expected Ethan de Groot, Taylor, and Lomax. Maybe there's a little bit of talk about Tyrell Lomax starting on the bench with the other Hurricane front row, but that's not the case. Josh Lord's an interesting one, isn't it? So Fabian Holland, I think I certainly thought that he would get picked. I mean, he's one of the first players I think you pick in that team. He has such an engine on him, and he's so dangerous at in the line out, pinching ball, securing our own ball. So I thought that was a pretty obvious one. But Josh Lord, I think that's a weird one. Look, Rennie obviously likes him. He started against Ireland with Tuipulotu, but again, Tuipulotu is not in this 23, and that's because they're not carrying an extra lock on the bench. So that is interesting for me to not have Tuipulotu or Derry in the locks, who are both probably your best like ball carriers in that position. I think is surprising given the opposition. So we're going to see, obviously, Tupuvoi's there at 6. He is going to shift into that lock, into the second row. You'd imagine, at some point in the game. But yeah, Josh Lord was an interesting one for me. They've obviously gone for, I think he's probably the biggest. Is he the biggest, or he's one of the biggest? He's got great hands. So, you want to play a fast game. That offload is going to be important. Maybe that's what they're looking at. Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. Jacobson, Savia, no surprises there. It's going to be interesting to see how Artie Savia does after being out for the time that he was. He's only been in South Africa for a week. I think we all saw his training that he was doing back in New Zealand, but still, nothing really is going to prepare you for a test match against the Boks. But you'd imagine he is Artie Savia and he's just going to be ready to go. That's what you see out of these guys who are at that. They're in that they're in their early to mid 30s and their season. They've been around the block. They've played these guys before plenty of times, and they just don't need the reps to get up to speed. They know what's coming. So you'd assume Artie is ready. Cam Roygaard, I've said quite a few times now that he's only played 20 minutes against the Boks. I see the Boks fans and pundits mention that quite a lot as it being, a problem for New Zealand, but I think it's also going to be a problem for South Africa. I think, the fact that they haven't played him, they've played the most recent halfbacks that they've seen out of New Zealand has been Finlay Christie, Noah Hotham. They saw a tiny bit of Preston, but not really. So, I think that's in the All Blacks' favour there. Ruben Love, a lot of question marks around whether he is going to be able to do it on the biggest stage of them all in South Africa against the Boks. He's the best 10 we got. I don't think you're going to put Beauden Barrett in there. You're just not. He's just, even though Beauden Barrett has the experience, he's just cracks under pressure now. He can't handle the rush D. So, I mean, there's no real other options there anyway. And Ruben Love's done nothing except excel in that position. So you back him, right? Geordie Barrett Tupaia, standard, and Will Jordan, Dane McKenzie at the back. Well, Will Jordan on the wing with Josh Morby. Nice to see that Will Jordan's fit, and Dave McKenzie back there at fullback again, another one that's fit. You see a lot of discourse on social media about the South Africans are probably going to be sending a hell of a lot more high balls now that Damien McKenzie is there, because he does have a little bit of an issue with his ankle. Um, you know, uh, if it was that bad, he probably wouldn't be playing. And I think you've also got Ruben Love. That's the beauty of having that sort of 10 and 15 combo. They can both play each other's positions. And on defense, you imagine Ruben Love is going to drop back to take those high balls. So I don't think there's a big issue there. I think, there's an issue's being made out of a nothing. On the bench, Asafo Mua, George Bower, and Fletcher Newell. George Bower is an interesting one, isn't it? Xavier Numia, I guess, didn't come through. Like, he had that little niggle, I think, after the Bulls game. So he's obviously been ruled out of this game. Otherwise, look, George Bower, you could see in that game he was really pushing for an inclusion in this team. He made an absolute monster of a tackle. The guy had to be taken off. He got absolutely crushed. So, I mean, if he can do more of that, then by all means get in there. But you do worry about his scrummaging. I think, like, I haven't seen a lot of George Bower recently. Like, I always had in my mind that he was a decent scrummager. So I don't think it's going to affect the scrum that much. But who knows? I probably would have preferred to see Numia there. Anton Segner, Peter Larkai. So there's your double loose forwards on the bench, which I like. I really like that. As I said, I probably would have started Tuipulotu instead of Josh Lord, and then still had two loose forwards on the bench and an Anton Segner and Peter Larkai. But obviously they've gone with no lock on the bench. But Segner's an interesting one again. He had such a good game against the Bulls, and again, you see a lot of talk, a bit of a narrative around that he's a bit too light for the Boks. I mean, it's frustrating to see these guys talking about some of these players that they just think, they have no idea. They haven't really seen Segner against the Boks. They think he's going to be too light. They think Peter Larkai is not good enough. They think all these things, but the reality is they haven't seen any of it. They're just going off what they've seen, and we can do that too, So, I mean, I don't have an issue with that forward pack coming off the bench at all. Kyle Preston, happy that he's there. The only issue with there's no issue with the backs on the bench, right? But the one change I probably would have made, I probably wouldn't have Leonard Brown and maybe even Leroy Carter. And that's no, I'm not giving them shit. That's no disrespect to them at all. Anton Leonard Brown, I thought's been really good. I just don't think we need another player in that team that can play 12. And I say that because, you've got Geordie there at 12. You've got Tupai at 13, who's, favoured position is 12. So you've got two guys there that can play 12. I think it would have made more sense to take Rico. And then you've got, another guy who can cover the back three plus centre. And then, you could take Leroy Carter as well, or you drop that completely and you take Fehi Finianganofo, who has a lot of X factor. I just think you get to a point where you don't need everyone in your team to have versatility. Like, we look at that bench, Segner and Larkai can both play the back three, all back row positions, right? Anton Leonard Brown can play 12 and 13. Leroy Carter can play 9, 13 wing. Like, at some point, you don't need multiple players on the bench that can play the same position, surely. And when you've got other guys who I think offer a point of difference, like a Fehi Finianganofo, So I don't really understand that. Yeah, it's a bit bizarre to me. But like I said, while I'm a little bit underwhelmed with that team, I think it lacks a little bit of physicality. I think Tuipulotu in that 4 instead of Josh Lord really gives the All Blacks a bit more go forward. So yeah, I mean that's my biggest issue is Tuipulotu not being in there, I think. And whether that's because he's not fit enough to go, the stretch at altitude or not. I don't know, but I guess we'll find out soon with the press release coming out soon. But yeah, those are my thoughts around the team. It is what it is. I guess we wait and see the Springboks team and who they've named and whether how that matches up. And I guess I just kind of look at this, and again, I just find the the disrespect and the sort of just the disrespect coming from the opposition fans, or not the fans, because we're all just fans that talk shit and back up our own team, right? But especially the pundits who have platforms to speak about the game, not always in a balanced way, but a lot of the time you want to see it at both sides. And all I'm seeing this morning is just Lord, who was it, that Harry guy who is for the most part a really good journo and rugby brain. He's basically calling out Josh Lord, Fabian Holland, who was it? Ruben Love, Morby, Will Jordan. No, not Will Jordan. Damien McKenzie, Bauer, Segner, Larkai, Preston, Leonard Brown, Lee Ricardo. All these guys he was happy with because he thinks they're not, they lack experience, which some of them do. But, lacking experience doesn't necessarily mean they're in the shit. So anyway, it's going to be interesting. Yeah, I think we're going to see some things that we didn't think were coming this weekend. Well, I think we could see something like just really outside the box from New Zealand, and I think if you look at you're trying to wear the team down. We see a lot of this like wearing the Boks down, running them off their feet, and I don't think it's people think like the All Blacks expect to just carry the ball to run them off their feet, but there's a lot of other ways you can run a team off their feet, and that's getting them constantly turning around, right? And I don't mean like putting up kicks like South Africa would do. It's more like kicking just little kicks in behind, and that it is actually quite interesting because you look at this Boks kick and it is in behind as well. It's 20 meters up the field and then trying to contest it in the air. But why aren't you looking at more contestable ground kicks? Why aren't we looking at contestable ground kicks, like a little chip over the top into, or even a grubber? One of those grubbers that are really hard to pick up when you've got guys right on top of you. Just putting those in past the defensive line into the fullback. The fullback's got someone like Adi Savia or Tupaya, Larkai when he comes on. You've got these guys who are so quick and can take the guy ball and all, and you've got a player then isolated and you're able to turn the ball over that way. I think that's something we might see from the All Blacks. It makes sense to me, right? You don't have the high ball, so you're not competing for the high ball, but you're still creating a situation where you're turning the pack, you're isolating a player, and you've then got a chance to win a penalty because either that player's got to hold on or you've got to hope that guys are getting back. Either way, it's still, yeah, I really think that could be something that the All Blacks will look at, or at least should look at. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see anyway.